everyone, to another episode of WannaCyber, where we get the opportunity to geek out about all things cybersecurity, pull back the curtain a little about what actually goes on, and demystify some of what is happening in the cyber world. Today, we're going to start unpacking a little bit about cyber and how it's not so complicated and hard, how there are simple things that have large impacts. And ultimately, once you get to the complicated, it's often after those simple steps and pieces. So we're going to start unpacking that. And so I am Rachael Skillman, and here with me today, I have Pete Hay. So we're really excited to get started. Pete, welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Phantom Menace Part 2. Which thankfully never happened in the movies, but we're talking about how that Phantom Menace is the obscurity, the way that cybersecurity can be difficult for people at the entry level to perceive. Acronyms, technologies, all kinds of, there's so many new things to pick up, but at its core, there's really two things that are taking place in cybersecurity. One is implementing defensive best practices, and two is analysis. And one of the things that, my background, we mentioned before, I came from nuclear chemistry over to cybersecurity. And what I learned is that analysis is analysis, whether it's analyzing chemistry in a nuclear system or whether it's looking at packets in a computer network. There are rules. And behaviors are driven by functions that things have to happen. And I think so when I was teaching, students would say, why is it that we still get breached? And I would say, because we still let people do things. And they would say, okay, then how come attackers aren't better at covering their tracks? And the answer is because the computer has to do a thing. And you have to tell the computer how to do a thing. And there are limits into what you can delete. And so I think that's my point, is we're inside a system. The system has rules, and we can perform analysis of it. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm obviously pretty excited about it.
I know the best part about WannaCyber is we just get to geek out for an hour, and it's the best time.
That's right. So I thought we would start today. I've got a couple of articles queued up. The two articles are about a ransomware gang called Darkgate, and the other one, we're going to talk about the breach of Change Healthcare. And before we do that, I'm going to pause and say, one of my deep and abiding dislikes, and because this is my podcast, I get to gripe about things I don't like, is what I call ambulance chasing in cybersecurity. What do I mean by ambulance chasing, Rachel?
What do you mean by ambulance chasing?
Oh, okay. So when I talk about, you don't know?
I don't know.
That means I haven't.
Thanks for putting me on the spot there. No, it's fine. So this is, what are you talking about?
I feel like it was because I worked in marketing last. I felt like every time a breach went down, someone in sales would come to us. How would we have prevented?
We could prevent this. Welcome. We could have saved you from this entire attack if you had our product. That is huge. Yes. I actually was on a call not long enough in my past. It should have been far in my past, where people were talking about how that was one of their big sales tactics. They're like, I want to have this email ready for the next breach, and I want to set up the notifications so that Google will warn me when a breach like this happens, and I can send this blast email out right away. It makes me so mad. Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about ambulance chasing.
So this is not totally illegitimate. And I think this is my problem. It's not totally illegitimate. The change, if we look at, actually, I'll just bring up the article since I have it here, and I'm completely changing my order of operations because this is so I'm looking at the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, and this is their kind of report based on talking to the Change Healthcare executives at their committee meeting. One, what I like about these reports are you don't have to watch the whole committee meeting because, as we know, there's a fair bit of grandstanding that takes place, but that doesn't mean that nothing useful comes out of them, and these articles are a great way of getting straight to the heart of the matter. And the thing that's interesting is sometimes stuff that comes out is not well disclosed elsewhere. If you start Googling how did the Change breach take place, they end up talking a lot about how the threat actor has behaved in other breaches, but they don't really talk about this. But in the House committee meeting, they got down to the fact that The failure was multi-factor authentication. So here's my point. If you are Duo and you bring multi-factor authentication, if you're Okta and you do MFA, or whoever that is, and you want to say, hey, we make MFA easy after the change breach, that's legitimate. There's a gracious way to approach that. There is a dignified, that's the word I'm really looking for, way to say, hey, these are risks. We make it easy to integrate that so that you can mitigate these risks going forward. There's also an undignified approach to that. And I think we see that's what I call the ambulance chasing.
My favorite part about, I had a brief time working in marketing for cybersecurity specifically, and I guess we all always work in marketing for cybersecurity, especially working with small business. But those are the people, and they'll be like publishing these articles of my product can save you. We could have done this better. You needed us and sign up with us and all this. We can prevent this multi-factor authentication hack. Look at this. We could have solved this problem. And those marketing people are the ones that don't have MFA turned on. Can we just all acknowledge that we're not always taking our own advice? That we're pushing out these articles and accidents happen. People are people. And yes, the breach is terrible and the business has to deal with the repercussions of that. But also, do you have multi-factor turned on everything? That it always makes me laugh. Everyone cares about what they care about, and we can't get away from people. Like you said, people are the reason attacks keep happening in this world right now.
Yes, I think, and we've talked about this a lot, that we think people are the dirty secret when it comes to cybersecurity. That you can talk about technology all day long, but it still gets implemented by people. You can talk about preventions all day long, but they're often bypassed by people. And I think that's the first topic for us as we really talk about how cybersecurity and demystifying it, right? What is the phantom menace in cybersecurity? Sometimes it's people. And many of the attacks that take place are due to people not bringing that level of skepticism. And we actually talked about it in part one. You talked about how cybersecurity encourages skepticism, and that can harm you when it comes to things like hiring and lowering barriers of entry for people. The flip side is one of the things we as cyber professionals need to push out to the people who have impact on cyber but are not necessarily cyber professionals is our same skepticism. So I think it's ironic that when part one we're telling people lower your skepticism when hiring, on the other hand we're like, but if you can induce a healthy sense of paranoia in your employees, you're doing a good job.
And I think more what you're trying to do instead of lower your skepticism is learn the safe places to unpack your skepticism for understanding people and people interactions, right?
So let's we'll take a look at the other threat actor that I want to talk about, Darkgate. Their primary method of access is email. It's phishing, social engineering. And so we'll take a look at that. But the thing that I wanted to say here is multi-factor authentication. This is not new, right? This is not a new requirement. CISA has made it a requirement for organizations that are in critical infrastructure. United Healthcare simply, at the end of the day, was not using it. By the way, let's look at the impact. So this is the thing. Is MFA difficult? No. Is it terrible? Is it complex to roll out? Maybe. Do some people resent it? Definitely. Are there better or worse ways to go about it? 100%. But the reality is nobody is sitting here going, what is multi-factor authentication? I've never heard of this. This new technology is what's going to protect us against breaches like change. It's not new. Here's the impact. And this is the thing. A third. So the failure to do one of the most basic things in cybersecurity caused a third of Americans to potentially have their sensitive health information leaked. What?
What makes me laugh is the amount of times I've tried to help organizations implement multi-factor, and I don't know about you, but the big pushback I always get is it takes so long, it's so inconvenient. What if I don't have my phone by me? How it's 4 extra click, it's 4 extra steps. And I don't know, that seems like a selfish look in view. Yes, I have to take 4 extra steps to log into this system, but that saves a 1/3 of Americans from their sensitive information being available to potentially bad actors. And sometimes it's incredible the hubris we have as people that impact so many others.
My convenience is greater than. Yeah, it's an excellent point. I do think there are good ways to go about implementing, like there are better ways, right? One of
Yeah.
the things that I really like, and I know that some people will get after me for this, but I really like LastPass Authenticator. I know LastPass got breached as a password vault, but their Authenticator app allows me to store to the cloud a backup of all of the multi-factor authentication that I have. If you have to upgrade phones, one of the biggest MFA failures, in my opinion, is the number of apps that do not migrate your MFA to the new
Across
device.
technologies.
Oh my goodness. And LastPass does that. For me, it's funny. They're like, oh, pull out your Microsoft account and I'm like, yep, you got it. LastPass, new account. And I ran into something recently where it errored because I wasn't using their app, but I found a couple of clicks away. Or if you prefer, in a tiny little font at the bottom, if you prefer to use a different app, click here. Oh, you son of a. So I click.
I'm clicking.
But I don't want to have 10 different, I don't want to have 10 different apps for multi-factor. I understand that gripe. I don't want to lose it if I have to migrate devices or I get to migrate devices. Totally get it. Here's the other thing I want to say just about this breach, and it's just an aside, but Change paid the ransom. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's not like you just get to pay it and it goes away. These are already criminals. There are already people who are willing to do what is not ethical, what is not legal, etc. So even though they paid the ransomware, there's no guarantee that data is safe. So all Change really did is they made their lives easier by paying the ransomware because they got return of those systems, etc. But they didn't make my life, assuming there's a greater than 50% chance that one of the two of us got exposed in that breach. So it didn't make either one of us any safer. It just made Change able to process payments faster. So they didn't really help me. And again, it goes back to what is the human cost? What is the impact of, in this case, not having multi-factor authentication? It's boggling to me.
It's incredible. And I guess it really just stresses the complicated part of cyber, and in this case, the risk mitigation process that they have to go through, and then handling the incident and breach that happened. But the complicated part happened after their failure to implement the simple step that you see people complaining about everywhere across multiple applications. The simple part of what let the attackers in allowed for the complicated means. So it just stresses that we have to have enough people spreading the simple message to start before we even need all those incident responders and analysts and things. So there's more need for.
No, you're exactly right. And there are great technology solutions that prevent things like ransomware. Like I have two friends over at Halcyon.ai. Shout out to Tommy and Remy over there. Halcyon provides a great product that is laser focused in on ransomware and ransomware only. And my personal opinion has always been that if you choose a custom built tool, it is more likely to be effective against the thing that it is. They're experts in one thing. It's ransomware. They're not trying to do 50 things. But Halcyon, to their credit, isn't out here saying, Change had only had Halcyon, this wouldn't have been an issue, right? Because the thing is, they are anti-ransomware. Everybody knows that about them. And going out and trumpeting it, Change isn't going to say, oh, as part of our mitigation strategy, we're getting Halcyon, just because they posted a blog online. Ambulance chasing just really, honestly, it would just upset me if I was at Change. But my point is, what Halcyon does is complicated. It's interesting, it's technical, it's deep. And this is my point about the Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace here is, you don't have to understand what Halcyon does to say, I'm auditing to make sure that every employee is implementing multi-factor authentication. One of the articles I read about the Change breach said an employee had failed to have multi-factor authentication turned on. And I felt it was so disingenuous, that article title, because the reality is that employee was allowed by policy to disable
Right,
MFA.
to have that.
That's not that like an employee. People will act in, I think it's Milton Friedman who describes it as their own enlightened self-interest. They're going to do what's easiest for them.
They're going to
And
do
so
what's easiest for them. And
that's where
and
policy
also
comes in.
they don't know better, right? Like it's almost like punishing a child for not knowing they weren't supposed to touch that.
Right. Right. Yeah, we're
How
the
can you,
grown-ups.
we're the grown-ups, and how do you, have you taught them that's not the way? And did you make it, honestly, if it was super precious and super valuable, if it's grandma's greatest antique bowl that is worth billions and billions of dollars, did you make it so that they couldn't reach it?
Yeah,
It's not going to foolproof and prevent a kid from not climbing on things and stuff, and you can't prevent all attacks, but you can do
yeah.
the little stuff. You
You
can put it on a top shelf.
Change left their Fabergé egg sitting on the knickknack shelf right by the TV remote, and it's not shocking that a child knocked it off. You're exactly right. And I felt it was a really disingenuous article. I thought it was extremely self-serving to allow that kind of language, because the reality is that employee didn't create the policy that allowed it. It's the person. At the end of the day, someone has to be the grown up. Somebody has to be responsible for making sure that we're doing the right things. And I published on LinkedIn the other day my 5 love languages of business, and one of them is policy. Right? Is policy, and the thing is, you can't have a policy that's not backed by anything. Right? You actually have to enforce that policy, and this was Change's failure to enforce that policy. Even if they said, "Oh, y'all should be using MFA," I guess they're a Southern company now. Y'all should be using MFA, but they're until you enforce it, people
Y'all,
aren't going to do that, right? You lock that employee out because they failed to adhere to policies. That's okay. And not only okay, it's necessary. Just like with children, there are consequences for actions and or inaction.
there are consequences for your actions.
Exactly. And instead, Change experience, and 1/3 of all Americans are going to experience the consequences for Change not taking action. Okay, I'm going to get off that soapbox unless you have something else you want to add there.
No, I mostly it, you just go back and forth between who's really responsible, as you were saying, for the policy enforcement and enhancement. And I think really in cyber, sometimes we focus so much after a breach on blaming the responsible party that we don't actually teach everyone how to do it differently for themselves and how to better their organizations and themselves. It's almost as if the blame makes their reputation better. And so this is a cultural thing that I hope we outgrow as a cyber organization, or as a cyber community, that the blame won't be more important than how do we move forward as a community.
I think that's an excellent point. And the other piece is you said grown up, and I'm going to fixate in on that. At some point, someone has to say, if you're in a position where you're like, I'm not the grown up they are, you're probably not coming across as well as you'd like to be. And if instead you're saying, I am a grown up and here's the part that I'm responsible for, here's what I can do better, here's what I learned from it, I'm going to always admire that more. And we talked about interviewing in our last piece. One of my favorite interview questions has to do with asking them about a time they had a great plan that blew up in their face and what did they learn from it. And I love seeing accountability. I love seeing honesty. I love seeing self-examination. Those are, in my opinion, critical components of being excellent. And I used to work with the 2 startups ago. A guy named Sean Donnelly was the CEO, and he called it a rage to excel. And I've always loved that term because I don't know, I have this like anime vision of I'm going to be excellent. The rage to excel is a part of that is, no, I'm the grown up. I may not be the grown up who should have foreseen all of this or whatever, just that honest self examination. And I feel like there's so much finger pointing that takes place in some of these, and it's just not a good look. It's just not a good look at all. The next topic that I want to talk about, though, is, and I'm gonna do this a little bit out of the order that we discussed in advance because it's funnier that way.
Perfect.
So here is something that I don't think you've seen yet, but here's a LinkedIn post that I saw this morning from Kevin Beuamont. And I think Kevin has some of the best takes in cybersecurity at all. I think he's a great follow. If you're not following him, go do it. I think he's Cyber Gibbons on X or Twitter or whatever you prefer to call it. But here was the thing that I saw from him this morning. We was talking about, again, when we start talking about, oh, there's this AI risk, and I feel like there's a lot of this. If I had a nickel for every time somebody started talking about post-quantum cryptography, thing is, we're not facing a quantum cryptography risk today. People are not losing money about it today. AI is not auto breaching left and right. And I can prove it to you because there are companies out there that do automated red teaming. And Scythe and Simulate are not saying, oh, yeah, here's the AI that we just taught to red team. It's not as simple as I think some of the alarmists want it to seem. I think Kevin's point here is next time somebody starts talking about one of these complicated things, bear in mind that CEO impersonation, right? Those last losses outpaced the ransomware losses. I didn't know this. And I need to do some research on this to get the actual numbers backing this. And I bet it's really hard to find because I guarantee you, if I got a text,
report on it.
I wouldn't admit it. If I could avoid admitting it publicly, I absolutely would. And because it probably doesn't fall under the new SEC regulations regarding a cyber breach, they may very well get away without reporting it. So it's probably very hard to pull statistics on this. So I'm going to go with Kevin. I believe that what he is saying is accurate. Anyway, think about the low barrier of entry for this. Set up a Yahoo or Gmail account, do some research, and send a request for stuff. When I was a company ago, I got text messages purporting to be from our CEO asking, hey, I'm at a conference. They would wait until RSA was going on. They would wait until Black Hat was going on. I'd get text messages that said, hey, this is the CEO. Can you grab me a gift card? Real quick, I need to give one to a vendor or I need to give a prize out for our booth or et whatever. I'm skeptical. Plus, I have his cell phone number in my phone. But you know what? If we were a bigger organization and I didn't have his number in my phone, it would have been pretty convincing, very convincing potentially. And again, if you're busy and there's a hectic event like Black Hat going on, and somebody says, hey, I need this gift card, no problem. So what advice do you have for somebody who's in that situation and all of a sudden something urgent pops up?
Yeah. So the first advice that I would have is take a deep breath. And I think that's the advice we give people when real trauma happens too. Take a deep breath and assess the situation. One of the best things to do is try and communicate to that person on a different channel, right? So if they're sending you a text message, try to get a hold of them through someone you know is next to them and standing next to them. Try and send them an email to someplace you've previously communicated. Try and escalate around, but try to get a hold of them in a different way to just validate that communication. Because often, I guess this goes back to the simplicity behind the logic of multi-factor to a single point. So this is one of my favorite fun facts.
So you're saying multi-factor validation. That's what I'm hearing.
Multi-factor validation. Ultimately, it also is, it's math. It's vector math. We're going back to geometry. A single point can have an infinite number of lines drawn through it. And if you add that second point, you know there's only one path that can be those 2 points. So you made it true in reality by just I have my 2 points that prove that this is what's actually happening in life.
That is an incredibly nerdy way of saying that, but I do agree.
It's vectors. It's just math that rules the world.
You're right. And that's what I mean by multi-factor validation.
Yeah, multi-factor. You just need that second, this is really happening.
My father, I love my father a great deal, and I feel I need to preface this story with that statement. My father sends me the most spearfishing looking emails, particularly early in morning, late at night, where he'll say something like, hey, oh gosh, there was one just the other day where he asked me to buy something for him because he didn't have his credit card or something like that. And it was for a rental car. We're all traveling together, and he's like, hey, can you reserve this rental car for me? And sent me a link. And I texted him. I was like, there is no way this is a legitimate email, right? This must be absolutely legitimate. My dad was like, yeah, what's the issue? What do you mean, what's the issue? You just asked me 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, you asked me to rent your rental car and sent me a link. There's no way that's legitimate. This is the most fishy. It's probably the most fishy looking email that I've ever received that was legitimate.
But it happened. I don't
does
think, and
happen.
even the story you were saying where CEOs text and they're like, oh crap, I need this Amazon gift card now for our RSA booth. I've gotten that legitimate text. Oh shoot, we forgot to do this. So the adversaries have it easy. We're handing them ammunition with just how unplanned and how life happens in random ways. They have the easy path. We have the hard path of trying to make sure, is this real life? Is this real life?
Black Hat. At that Black Hat where I got that text, we had not brought with us a Lego Millennium Falcon that was a planned giveaway. And so we did actually have to go buy one. So there was a text. That was the crazy part is I got a text that was like, hey, go buy this thing from target.com and pick it up locally. And then 3 or 4 texts later, then I got one very similarly sketchy. Hey, just ordered this Amazon gift card for me. They were so similar, one legitimate, one illegitimate. And the fortunate thing is when I got the legitimate one, it was quite literally somebody standing across a booth from me. So I was like, this one? Yeah, okay. All right, multi-factor validation. But with the other one, I had to absolutely make a phone call I actually called his personal assistant to make sure that this was legitimate. She's like, yeah, nope, we don't know what you're talking about. All right, great. That's wonderful. Because the thing is, I didn't have his personal assistant's cell phone number. So if she had been texting me, asking me to buy that, it could have been legitimate. You got to check, especially around those big events. So,
and I promise no one is going to be mad at you for checking on something that's legitimate, even if it spends a couple extra minutes of your time, because of the risk it will save if you ever get one of those illegitimate. And going back to, was it Kevin? Is that who did that post?
Yeah, Kevin Beuamont, yes.
Kevin Beuamont. I fully believe that statistic, just in that I've worked for 6 or 7 organizations now, or with 6 or 7 organizations now, none of which have experienced ransomware, all of which I have had a story about a CEO imposter fraud, social engineering scam. Like all of them, I can come up with a story from each of them. So I would not be surprised at all. And some of them where they actually got the iTunes gift cards they were requesting, and we had to deal with the aftermaths of it. So I would not be surprised at all.
Well, it's again back to the barrier for entry. What's the barrier for entry as a ransomware gang? You got to have initial access methods. You got to have droppers. You got to have infrastructure to handle callbacks. You got to have anonymization solutions, which probably means compromising the sites and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot that goes into that. So yeah, if you're looking for a startup, I don't know that ransomware gang is your like low lift, easy startup. But that's Pete's hot business tip for you. The barrier for entry is lower and the losses are higher. Yeah, that's I guess that's our takeaway today is don't click on the email.
And if you want
by the way, don't click on the freaking email. Let's talk about Darkgate. So this comes from Cisco's Talos blog. Talos blog, do you know how that's said? Talos. Okay, so Cisco's I don't believe in phonics blog. This is the Darkgate ransomware gang, and it should be a long A, right? Phonics. Here's what I wanted to bring about this one. I love threat intelligence. I spend a lot of time reading it. I actually strongly believe if you are an entry-level person, you should find a couple of blogs that talk about threat actors, how they do what they do, and you will be shocked at how easy they are to stop if you are just vigilant. But take a look at it. I think I've talked extensively. Hands-on is the most important thing you can do as a person entering cyber. And I believe a great way to get experience in threat intelligence is to read it. And Talos, whoever they are, they have a great blog. And I believe they have some of the easiest to consume threat intelligence out there. And really, so I'm a regular reader. Here was my takeaway, though. Darkgate's talking about how this blog is talking about how Darkgate's tactics, techniques, and procedures have evolved over time. But here's what struck me as I was looking at it. This is their email campaign. This is embarrassing. If I fell for this email, I would be embarrassed. This is not a good spear phishing lure. And if you take a look, what they say is a considerable number of our clients reported receiving emails containing Microsoft Excel file attachments that followed a distinct pattern in its naming convention. First of all, here's where it gets complex. Building the signature rule that describes how you identify dynamically dark gate in your email, and so you can grab it and snatch it out of people's mailboxes so that people don't click the freaking link.
Don't click the link.
But like, how do you stop Darkgate? Don't click the link. Just don't click the link.
Don't do it. If you see a link, don't click it. Just don't click the effing link. Just back away. Be so skeptical. Ask someone if this link is really something they should click. View the preview. Make sure you know where it's going. Just don't click the freaking link.
Have you considered opening it in a virtual machine? Like, there are a million different ways to avoid clicking the link in a potentially harmful way. You could click the link on a machine that doesn't have an active internet connection, because if it's an Excel spreadsheet, it should be fine. So anyway, but this is the thing, like, that's where the analysis gets complex. If we were ambulance chasing and you just got compromised by Darktrace, the product I'd be trying to sell you is don't click the freaking link technology, right? Like, if only you had don't click the freaking link technology, you wouldn't have been compromised by Darktrace. And this is what I mean. This is the Phantom Menace. We tell people cyber's hard, and it is. But not clicking the link is not.
It's pretty easy.
There are parts of it that are.
Then again, I kind of go to, it's such a hard, complex part of our world where we joke and we say, just don't click the link. However, our world is run by clicking links and slacking people links to drives and to folders and videos and all of these. And so it's wonderfully complicated and simple all at the same time.
And there are certain risky things. And this is where the trend analysis comes in. Right now, if we're going with the Zoolander quote, Excel documents so hot right now. They're in. And the technique that's actually used here, by the way, you can identify regions that are being targeted. I think it's a nice part about what's disclosed by Talos. I'm a big believer in infographics and visualizations. One of the things that they do on this is they are using an embedded object with an external link to an SMB file share, and it uses a template, if I recall correctly. So there's like an Excel template that has a Visual Basic script that points to the SMB share where they download. This, again, like I said, one of the things, credit to Cisco, they may not like phonics, but they love good infographics. And I think this one is a great, easy to consume chain of execution. So there's an email, and what I would put right here is don't click the freaking link, but you did. So now the attachment has the Excel. It's actually the one thing that I think is a little disingenuous about this.
Don't you stop to enable?
So the Excel attachment has the external template. And so that's the one piece that's not really exposed here in this graphic, is the template is then downloaded, which has Visual Basic. And the really interesting thing is the VBS is not present in the Excel spreadsheet. So if you are using, check the freaking link technology in your email, right? So if it's scanning the Excel spreadsheet looking for Visual Basic scripts, it will not find it unless it downloads the template. So this is the game of whack-a-mole that's taking place between the technology solution and the adversary. So the adversary has said, there are these technology email scanning that's going to look at the Excel spreadsheet and determine if there's something malicious in there. So we won't leave it in there. We're going to dynamically bring it in at runtime, and maybe the email scanner will be lazy and not properly render this in Excel. And as we learned from Darkgate's success, that's happening. So then they hit the public-facing SMB server and they download it. So I guess this is actually, that's the download portion, right? That's where the template is being hosted. And then PowerShell scripts run. And one of the really interesting things happens here is they used to use AutoIT or AutoIT, which is crazy because I first used AutoIT in, I think, 1990 when I was working in IT for Shamrock Consulting for the Palm Desert La Quinta Parks and Rec department. And I was using it so that their computers would start up and automatically run the card scanner software, the barcode scanner software,
Yeah.
so they could just turn on the computer and everything worked and nobody had to know how to log into anything and it was perfect. But this is an old technology, and now they've just shifted from auto IT to auto hotkey, and they're using scripts to establish persistence and execution. Old things have become new again, but if you're using static signatures for their behavior by looking specifically for auto, they broke it. And that's the game of whack-a-mole. You produced a Sigma rule that looks for auto IT, and so they switched to auto hotkey instead of auto IT, and the game of whack-a-mole continues, which is, of course, why I'm a big proponent of climbing the pyramid of pain. Although David Bianco has stepped back from that terminology. He says he just did a talk called "I Broke Threat Intelligence" several years ago, and I'm so sorry. Something like that. Anyway, the takeaway for this is we can sit down, and this is a quite long article, and it gets quite in depth about what's in the Visual Basic script and what the executables are and the indicators of compromise, the actual hash values associated with the various scripts and tools, etc. But if we back all the way up and you deploy don't click the freaking link technology, none of that matters. And I think that's the thing that is so important about cybersecurity. And this is the phantom menace of cybersecurity, is an engaged, aware, conscious workforce, skeptical workforce can be, am I going to say just as effective? I think I'm actually going to say more effective than millions of dollars of cybersecurity tools by just not clicking the link, by not doing financial transactions. I know several years ago, Ubiquiti got caught with a like $40 million CEO impersonation issue where somebody was impersonating both a legal office and the CEO and the CFO, and they were sending emails back and forth and tricking everybody involved. There were millions of dollars transferred out basically to buy a factory in Asia. And it was just, oh yeah, I know this is happening. I'm conscious of this. And so it never tripped their "this is sketchy" alarm. And for me, there should be a dollar amount that by policy trips a multi-vector, if you're using your term, multi-vector validation.
Thanks.
And it comes back to policy
Uh,
and enforcement.
yeah. And I think beyond just don't click the link, the other simplicity I really liked that you pointed out here, they didn't massively change. Darkgate didn't change their techniques at all. Like, again, you said this, they did not change their techniques. They changed two key aspects that people were looking for, and they got to fly under the radar for however long.
Yep.
And that goes back to the simplicity where, yeah, finding the two key things that they changed and doing the analysis to actually discover what happened, stuff, that's the hard part. But the logic of what they did is pretty simple. They're looking for X, let's use Y. Oh,
So is
how
that our
beautiful.
takeaway today? Is avoid the hard work, don't click the freaking link? Is that our
Yeah, you'll be more secure than the person next to you if you just don't stop clicking all links forever. Don't.
Well, yeah, but it's true. Actually, this is a really good point. It's a really good point. I've said this for years while teaching. We could design a computer that was unhackable, right? And I would probably encase it in titanium and drop it to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. And basically, the only person who could hack it at that point in time is James Cameron because he has a bathysphere. It requires bathysphere technology to hack that. The user experience for said machine would be suboptimal.
Terrible.
And there's always that balance between user experience and security.
And I guess some of that skepticism is if it's so easy, maybe you add to, is it right? Is it too easy? I think that ultimately is don't click the link. Hey, this link makes things super convenient. This link says it's going to solve all my problems. Is it too easy?
The other thing, so there's a sales technique here. Have you heard of the FUD principle in sales?
No, FUD.
It stands for, all right, this is a dirty secret of sales. Ambulance chasing is a perfect example of this. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you can make a customer feel FUD and then solve it for them, they will
They'll give you
probably
all
give
their
you money.
money. Oh
That's right.
yeah,
And so
easily.
here's my personal recommendation for your internalized cybersecurity rule, right? Detection for what is probably a bad email. If the email creates a problem and gives you a method for solving it in one go, it's something you should be more suspicious of. And it's just like a sales pitch when somebody comes to you and says, "We've discovered a new vulnerability, we've invented a new technology." I used to watch Big Bang Theory religiously. And when Bernadette got her job working for the pharmaceutical company, and she said, "I invented a cure for a new disease today." And they said, "What's the disease?" And she said, "I haven't invented the disease yet." And it's one of my favorite lines in anything. And the reality is that's Spud. When you have created a
The
problem and
cure.
a solution, and you heard me talk critically of post quantum cryptography and some of the AI detections and preventions. Those, in my mind, when you're talking post quantum cryptography, it's a problem that isn't yet a problem. And I am all for research on things that are going to be the next generation of problems. But you can't start selling it until it's actually solving the problem. And because then you're inventing the problem and solving it at the same time. Same thing goes for that sketchy email that's, "Hey, I'm the CEO and something's gone horribly wrong." Oh, that email just created a problem. Click this link and send me money to solve that problem. That should be triggering multi-vector validation. I really like that term and I'm stealing it from you,
There's
but I'll at least
proof
give you
that it was
credit for it.
mine. I
No,
appreciate
there's
that.
no doubt about it. And what's
Uh,
funny is I made fun of you for being nerdy and then I stole it. Total
but it
hypocrisy on
comes
my
back to
part.
just the don't click the Evan link. Just don't.
Don't click the effing link and have an internal validation process for what it would take to get you to click the link. And I think that comes back to like multi-factor is as long as we make multi-factor not too burdensome, not too laborious, people will use it. People will act in their own self-interest. Put a policy that's not too ridiculous. Give people training that's not too obnoxious. Do annualized spear phishing tests. I'm a big believer in anything hands-on. Tabletop exercises are a great way to game these things out.
Now we
There are a
come
lot
back
of
to the
solutions out there.
fun balance of people. And ultimately, this is where we always come back to because it's both of our passions is the people make the technology and they make your business.
And they
From
can certainly unmake it. That's
and
for
they
darn
can
sure.
certainly unmake it really fast. And as cyber is trying to lower the barrier of usability, because I've seen so many more just efforts in how do we make cyber security, cyber awareness, and cyber best practices more user friendly. I think there's also the other side of it of we need to teach people that's going to take time for the technology to do that, but look at the impact of these extra 3 steps that it could have on our business, on our organization, and sometimes just that transparency of not trying to scare them, like we're not trying to put the fear in them, but just the reality of the world we live in. Those extra 3 steps are inconvenient for you, but could save our customers. And as we work to make those 3 steps better and easier for you, please take them in the short term.
I think there's also this, you know, and it goes back to the topic of that phantom menace. I think many people feel the weight, like the sword of Damocles hanging over their head. But the thing is, if it's not made real to them, or if they're not given the opportunity to interact with it directly, eventually it becomes mundane. Anything, anybody can get used to anything at any point in time. My grandfather told me, he said, the Korean War taught him that you can do anything for a year, that anything can become normalized to you over time. And it's always stuck with me. And what we don't want is for people to become inured to the threat or just accustomed to it. And that's where it comes into do the spear phishing tests, do the tabletops, don't punish, give rewards, right? People who are
Yeah.
consistently accurate on forwarding things to security or reporting things, give rewards for that. Even if they're just silly rewards. I had a
Did
company
you
that
see
gave
that?
out
Oh, keep going.
no, I had a company that gave out a soccer ball that had been signed by the security team for being the MVP. It was just like it was a really weird gift, but you got to stick it out because you were like you were the MVP this month for the that you were not a part of the security team, but you helped the security team the most. And I think it was done quarterly or annually or something. You just got like just a soccer ball in a case showed up on your desk, and they're like, "Thanks for making our lives better." It was really cool. And people were like, "What's a soccer ball?" And then they got bored because they thought they were like, "Oh, did you get U.S. men's national or women's national team to sign it?" No, like for the security, but it was a good topic. So we are. I think this was a great topic, and I could talk about it ad nauseum with you and a patient by myself, but I've enjoyed this tremendously. So this was part 2 of the Phantom Menace. Thank you so much for your time, Rachel, and for those of you who joined us for it. Thanks, comment, follow, and please feel free to give us your opinions in the comments.